We're going to take you live now to Chelsea, Quebec. Foreign Affairs Minister John Baird taking questions from the media. First question, the ongoing crisis in Syria. Let's listen in.
Foreign Secretary William Hague, and I'll be speaking to others about the path forward. We were troubled that the Security Council continues to be unable to take decisive action in terms of even just putting out a strong statement. So we'll be talking obviously closely in the coming days with friends and allies on the use of these weapons. Obviously, in my judgment, the only end to the suffering of the Syrian people will be a political solution. We remain supportive of the U.S.-Russian initiative, Geneva II. Having said that, it's becoming increasingly challenging, an increasingly challenging and complex issue. Listen, if there was an easy solution, the Security Council, Canada, like-minded countries would have tackled it much sooner than now. But we're obviously appalled at the violence. Did you want to?
Sorry, forgive me.
Yes, let me just share some additional thoughts from Indonesia's perspective as well. What we have been seeing throughout the situation in Syria is a constant and continuous worsening of the situation. And the latest episode simply reached, there's a new low in the way the conflict has now degenerated. The point that we wish to emphasize that in the final analysis, the only solution is a political solution, and all the efforts by the international community, the Security Council, all of us must put our strongest of encouragement and efforts to have the Geneva II conference convene, and for the resolution of the issue to be back on track through diplomacy and through dialogue and negotiations. Too much human suffering have taken place, and enough of this, and we must set aside our respective whatever differences that countries may have to really create conditions conducive to encourage and even cajole all the parties involved back to where they should be, which is to have dialogue and negotiations.
En français, si je pourrais dire, notre concern était avec le peuple syrien.
Our concern is with the Syrian people, the use of chemical weapons by the Assad government is quite clear now, and it's a major concern for everyone. So we are currently working with and talking to our friends and allies to find an answer.
Sir, as we've been talking to members of the medical community here in Canada that say that Canada has some stockpiles of drugs or medicine that would lessen or reduce the harm of chemical weapons. Is there any desire to move such drug materials to either Syria or to the border around?
It goes without saying that we would do anything humanly possible to support the victims of chemical weapons, and I'll certainly look into those comments that you mentioned. We provided, like I said, financial resources for the investigation. We provided, I think we're one of the leading countries providing humanitarian assistance for the victims of Assad's government. We do acknowledge that as long as this human tragedy goes on longer, it is the biggest humanitarian crisis of this century. As long as it goes on, we're going to obviously have to, countries like Canada will have to continue to step up to the plate and assume our responsibilities. We've also done things about nuclear and radiological detection equipment for some of Syria's neighbors. But obviously anything we can do to help the Syrian people, we're prepared to consider.
Bonjour, Martin Bégin de Radio-Canada.
Mr. Baird, I'd like to hear a bit more about Syria from you in French. Everyone is concerned. Everyone is looking for a political solution, but it's just not happening. Is it really possible to find a political solution? And how many people will have to die until the international community actually does something? Well, if there were an easy solution after 2.5 years, we just haven't found that solution. And obviously it's a major concern, the humanitarian situation and the victims of the Assad regime. We're hearing reports recently about the use of chemical weapons, which is also a great concern for us. Today I spoke to my counterpart in the UK, and I have been discussing it with my Indonesian counterpart as well. And in the coming days I will be talking to other colleagues as to what the world can do. We've been working at New York and the United Nations to see whether there can be some real action coming out of the Security Council. After yesterday's meeting, there was no agreement, and we weren't even able to get an official response from the Security Council. So we're discussing at this point the situation with our colleagues. But in my opinion, the only way to have an end to the war against the Syrian people is to find a political solution. And for 2.5 years now, we've seen that there is no political solution. We've seen the response from the government and from the opposition. We've seen some terrorist action on the part of certain elements within the opposition, and that also greatly concerns us. But we will continue to work with our friends and allies. But at this point, there is no simple answer to the tragedy. And another question. There was a lot of discussion yesterday about Justin Trudeau's use of marijuana. Have you ever used this drug since you were an MP? No.
No. Listen, I think politicians are entitled to private lives, but the answer would be an unequivocal no. I came of age politically in the 1980s, and I can recall well one of President's nominees for they asked if I had ever smoked marijuana. I won't allow them to ask you that question. But I came of age politically in the 1980s, and I can recall when one of President Reagan's nominees for the U.S. Supreme Court had to withdraw because of his use of that substance. So I took my example from that.
Brian Mullen, Global News. Minister, the French foreign minister says force will be used if it's proven that Assad's regime used chemical weapons. So if it is proven, what consequences are going to flow from this?
Listen, our first response is to validate the use of these chemical weapons. The evidence is increasingly building up, and it's overwhelming. We've supported the United Nations effort in this regard, providing $2 million several months ago to specifically support the UN's ability to validate. I've spoken today with my counterpart from Indonesia. I spoke earlier with my counterpart from the United Kingdom. I'll be speaking with others for a full response. I think we should get the information and consult with our friends and allies first before we come to conclusions.
And what are the options you discussed with the British Foreign Secretary for moving forward?
We discussed, obviously, the evidence and the intelligence that he gave. I said to him that if the ridiculous assertion that this might have been done by the opposition to gain sympathy in the West, that you would actually kill 1,000 of your countrymen, including women and children, a large number of children, is patently ridiculous. The fact that Syria continues to bombard this specific geographic area, I think is telling. And the fact that Syria won't let the UN inspectors who are on the ground in the country today visit this area is a very telling action.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, Minister Baird, Josh Winger from the Globe and Mail, you don't sound like you have much doubt. You express doubt that maybe the videos aren't authentic or they aren't what they appear to be.
There's no doubt the evidence is mounting.
Based on this week's video or based on what?
I think the evidence we've seen of previous limited use, and then I think the suggestion is there's been some 70 warheads used in this particular incident, and the large number of victims. Obviously, we'd like to see the UN group that's on the ground, the experts, be able to be on the ground to investigate firsthand. It's quite telling, the fact that they're not allowing it in.
Are you ruling out any military role for Canada?
You know, listen, we're going to get the facts first and talk to our friends and allies before we come to any conclusions.
Hi, Peter Ackman, CTV National News. Just on the Foreign Service strike that's ongoing, students should be coming here to Canada, international students. Many of them are very frustrated that they may not be able to study, they may miss their first semester. What do you have to say to them as this log jam continues in terms of?
I don't think it's in anyone's interest that we negotiate through the media. Obviously, we value the role of our public servants. They do a great job for Canada. With respect to visas, this is handled by my colleague, Chris Alexander. Obviously, we'd like to see these issues settled as quickly as possible. Having said that, we have important responsibilities to the taxpayer, who don't have unlimited amounts of funds to solve labor disputes. You know, our number one focus is on jobs and economic growth, and returning to a balanced budget is a key part of that. And that is obviously we've got to reduce the increases in public expenditures.
Beyond the financial side, does it damage Canada's reputation internationally that I can't come to study here, or I missed an entire semester, it hindered my progression through my degree?
Well, you know, listen, we want to see this. We want to see a fair deal for taxpayers and a fair deal for our public servants, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.